нуждается в надежном, в безопасном источнике энергии, который значительно улучшит качество жизни населения. Реакторная установка «Ритм-200Н» станет сердцем АСММ. 6 подобных реакторов серии «Ритм» уже установлены на 3 современных российских атомных ледоколах. Высокий уровень безопасности станции обеспечивается комбинацией активных и пассивных систем защиты, которые предотвращают угрозу таких внешних воздействий, как падение летательного аппарата, землетрясения, снеговые нагрузки, воздействие экстремальных температур, ветер, ураган, смерч, циклон. Атомная станция малой мощности обеспечит энергонезависимость региона, стабильное энергоснабжение месторождения Кючус и ближайших населенных пунктов. Более того, атомная энергетика не оказывает негативного воздействия на окружающую среду, в отличие от традиционных для севера Якутии дизельных источников энергии. Реализация проекта АСММ позволит...
Коллеги,
colleagues,
всем добрый день.
good afternoon to everyone.
Очень рад приветствовать всех.
I am very glad to greet you at today's session devoted to the modernization of local power generation with the use of renewable energy storage and energy storage systems. My name is Maxim Gubanov, and I represent the Corporation for the Development of Russian Far East and Arctic. So this is very topical for the Russian Far East and Arctic, and as a corporation we have been dealing with it for a long time, and our activities are aimed at attracting as many companies with investments into the implementation of projects in the Russian Far East and Arctic. So the distributed generation in isolated areas is very attractive for foreign investors, and the number of such projects tells us that there is huge investment potential. So our task is to reveal this potential, including the mechanisms of state support, which leads to better living of the population and reducing unnecessary operational expenses on cross-subsidies. So when we were starting, we talked to a lot of businesses and companies working in the area, and we heard what are the challenges, so that you need to have some beneficial loans, some preferences, and we talked to municipal governments who complained that there are no special programs on that. So we were able to compile a list of proposals for a target program which would help the development institutes to provide systemic support for the companies for their better understanding to enter projects like this. And this project would be socially and economically profitable for the regions. So the results of this work, which has been conducted for 3 years, the Ministry for the Development of the Russian Far East came up with the proposal to develop such a program and to approve it. And that was
Поэтому хотелось
at
бы
the
сегодня
president's
уже
level.
говорить не о том,
And
что нужна ли эта
today
инициатива,
we
нужна ли
are
эта программа
talking
или
not
нет, а
about
говорить
the
о том,
necessity
какие
of
эффекты мы
such a
ожидаем от
program,
этой
but we
программы,
are already talking about the effects of
что
the program
мы
like
хотели бы
this,
увидеть в этой программе
what we would like to
и
see in this
что
program,
нам
and
мешает реализовывать
what
проект уже сейчас,
impedes the
какие
implementation of our
механизмы
projects at the
поддержки
moment,
мы хотим
what
увидеть в будущем.
mechanisms of
Поэтому
support we would like to see in
с
future.
удовольствием передаю слово нашему первому
So
докладчику, это
I'm
Евгений
glad
Шелковой,
to give
главный
the
эксперт
floor to
компании
our
«Русгидро».
first speaker,
«Русгидро»,
Evgeny
естественно,
Shelkovой
является
from Rushydro
компанией, которая
company.
эксплуатирует
So
огромное
this is the
количество этих
company
объектов, при этом
operating
сама
lots of
привлекает частные
facilities,
инвестиции. Поэтому,
and
Евгений,
they attract
расскажите, как вы
a
это
lot
делаете
of
и что вы
private
видите
investments. So
от
Evgeny, please tell
программы,
us how you
которую
do
мы
that.
разработали. Спасибо.
Да, добрый день, коллеги.
Good afternoon, dear
Спасибо большое
colleagues.
организаторам.
Thank you for the organizers for
Важную тему.
giving the opportunity to discuss this important topic.
Большое спасибо республике.
And I would like to thank the Republic,
является тем регионом,
which is the region leading in the development and modernization of local power generation.
Группа Русгидро это
Indeed, Rushydro
объект локальной генерации, это
operates numerous facilities in Yakutia and Kamchatka, Sakhalin, with the capacity over 250 megawatts, so which makes half of the local power generation in Russia. And our priority is reliable and efficient supply to customers. What is important? These regions, they are supplied by regulated companies and basing on tariff approach. So the task for modernization and increase reliability, these issues are faced every year. Because stable supply is life-supporting in those settlements, and there are some key targets set in the energy strategy of the Russian Federation until 2035. So our session is called strategic session, and our company also has this strategic goal of modernization. What has been done? So first, technical solutions. So of course, RES technologies, energy storage, automatization, these are the most innovative directions, and the solutions in these areas, they bring us to hybrid generation. We have RES, and we have anchor generation, like diesel, for example, generation, plus automated control. So we have chosen the technical solution. So this hybrid concept is quite flexible. You can develop new standards of operation and maintenance, but this is our main solution at the moment. Second, we looked at the agreements and contracts. So in 2019, we had some changes in legislation and towards the energy efficiency. So now the priority is saving the fuel. So basing on service contracts, there is a mechanism for modernization. The task is the comprehensive overall modernization, because when you change one diesel for another, it's not about modernization. So you need to change not only the main generating facility, but also surrounding parts like fire protection, pump station, and so on. So that's why service contracts mechanism have been tested, and we've signed 13 contracts, and everything is transparent and adjusted now. And as you see in our videos, there are already successful examples of our hybrid complexes being launched. And now we ask our investors those solutions which lead to comprehensive modernization. And there are some complicated technical solutions requirements, because we understand that this is the north and there must be some reserve, maybe sometimes double reserve. And when your main unit has some troubles, you need to understand where you are going to install your diesel. So probably you need to construct another main unit. And usually it is accompanied by solar panels. And again, they require lots of space, and so the allotment of those areas for panels is another issue. So we have seen what problems we can face, and we are working on them. But again, we need this comprehensive state approach, because goals are set on the highest level and they are to be achieved. And as Maxim mentioned already, we support this systemic approach to the modernization of local power generation. And we use all the mechanisms existing now, and first of all, service contracts. Well, thank you. Another question to you. So you attract energy service companies, and they save fuel.
Справедливо ли от них требовать модернизации всей системы?
So, is it just to require from them to modernize the entire system? Or if you include modernization into a project, whether it's be profitable? Yes, this is quite important, because the return on investment mechanism now is the savings from fuel costs. Of course, there are settlements of different levels. So in some settlements, this saving doesn't from small settlements are not enough. But in bigger settlements, the savings are quite big, and this is profitable. So when we were calculating our projects, so they were efficient and profitable, but due to the increased cost of construction and equipment, those indicators have changed. Whether it's just or unjust to require complete modernization, well, our task is to provide stable supply, and we are fully for creating a new technological approach. So this solution helps us to modernize a facility within 1 year. So we can install efficient equipment. So that's the mechanism we are using now. Indeed, Rushydro company has the largest number of sites like this, and now I am giving the floor to the person from the southern electrical grids of Kamchatka. So their facilities are smaller than in Yakutia. But what are your relations with the investors and how you solve challenges? Hello, thank you for your question. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for the opportunity to participate in this conference. Out of 6 previous conferences in Yakutsk, I am taking part for the 5th time. So if you allow me, I would like to show the presentation of our company, and we will cover the questions on the way. So I would like to go back into the history. So we are smaller in territory compared to Yakutia, but southern electrical grids, they supply Kamchatka. They have been doing that for 57 years in the area of over 200 square kilometers. So we supply power to 23 settlements in 9 of the 18 municipalities. And also we provide heat supply. So the population serviced is about 30,000 people. So southern electrical facilities are represented with 19 diesel stations, 1 hydro station, 1 gas hydro power stations, and 6 wind farms. So the total installed capacity is 62.3 megawatts. So we have 19 diesel stations with 57 megawatts, 1 diesel, 1.6, 1 hydro, 1.6, and wind farms, they produce 1.75 megawatts. So the renewable sources accounted for 7.3 megawatts. So the rest account for 6% of the power generated. Today, we are working in 2 directions. First, funded by our own investment program, and the second is by private investments. So we have 3 energy service contracts. Today, to make your projects attractive for investors, your facility must be most effective, and the satellite settlement must also modernize the generation facilities. So you see the map of Kamchatka. So the first site is Telichki-Osora. This is the east coast. So Telichki is more attractive because of the road accessibility. So this port never freezes.
В объекте модернизации установка солнца и ветра.
So there will be some 600 kilowatts wind turbine, also solar panels, and also diesel generators of 1 gigawatt. So the second contract has been signed with Zarevsk-Ключи, which is close to the Petropavlovsk of Kamchatsky.
Это порядка 17 миллионов киловатт-часов, в отличие от Козыревского, у которого доля выработки составляет порядка 7 миллионов.
Kazarevska is less attractive with 7 million kilowatt hours. And the third facility is quite challenging project because it took a long time to make a decision. So it's Vodayom Kamchatka company, Palana Manila. So Palana is, they are both in remote areas. So the navigation period is limited to May to November period, and navigation is not possible from November through May. So we have a small-scale hydropower station in the Bystre river of installed capacity 1.8. So there are 3 units. So it's of derivational type. So we have per 770 model. So this is a part of the Kamchatka electrical grid. Last year it generated 62.4. So what are our challenges in operating this plant? So it needs to be shut down during ice formation. As for the wind generation, we operate wind turbines in Nikolskoye village, and we bought them from one of the companies members of the Roshydro. So there are 2 wind turbines of 0.25 megawatts. So the annual demand in fuel is 64 tons, so the saving on fuel is about 100 tons. So the substitution rate is 206. So it depends on the season. So in spring and fall, the substitution reaches 32 or sometimes 40%. In Uscom settlement, we also operate a wind turbine. Also of Venier make. And since 2015 to 2017, they were turbines of Kamai by 300 kilowatts. They were transferred to the government of Kamchatka. So Vernier and Kamai, they help us to save almost 400 tons, with the total demand 5,500. So you see the maximum substitution during the year. Unfortunately, given the Uskamchatsk conditions, we would like them to work most effectively in summer. But unfortunately, wind turbines, they don't give this effect. Because the industrial companies, they work mostly in summer. But in wintertime, they cover the demand. As for the comprehensive modernization, along with service contracts, we conduct comprehensive modernization of Uskamchatsk's electric power plant with the replacement of 7 diesel generators to modern one of 1.6 megawatt capacity.
направили в наш адрес заявление.
So now industrial companies understand that they can benefit from using basic tariffs. So this project is to be launched, completed in December 2023. Also, there is an agreement between the governments of Kamchatka and Rushydro to build the fourth wind turbine, also of Kamai make. We bought it last year, and this until the end of this year, we set the launching date as December 25th, including all start-up works. Also, we have obligations under a concession between our company and municipalities in the northmost area of Kamchatka, where we modernize diesel stations without RES.
Своего эффекта не показали. Что касается солнца,
As for solar power,
мы реализуем строительство солнечной электростанции.
so we are constructing a solar farm
Нами давно пройдено, но тем не менее на Камчатке
in Kamchatka. So this is a pilot project for Kamchatka, which is going to show the efficiency, because Kamchatka is different from Yakutia in solar installation and other parameters. And this year we installed 96 panels, and
которые в общем дают установленную мощность 30
with installed capacity of 33.6 kilowatts, and we generated 1,000 kilowatts, which helped us to save some 200 tons of fuel, of diesel. So we are going to buy another 100 panels with the accumulator facilities, because now they are connected to the grid directly through an inverter.
Скажите, а какое оборудование используется в этих проектах?
What equipment is used in your equipment? Are there any problems with bringing with this equipment?
Вот то, что вот вы обозначили, и мне это касается и дизельных станций.
Да, по тем проектам, которые сегодня реализуются по ветроустановке марки Камай, она уже приобретена.
Kamai wind turbine has been already purchased.
Оборудование закуплено.
And in Uscom we already have bought the diesel generators, and we don't see any serious challenges at the moment. Of course, we understand that during operation some problems may arise, but the contract, the terms of the contract stipulate that until the first capital repair, the company will supply us with all necessary spare parts. As for solar power, solar panels are of Chinese make, and the tender procedures have been completed, and we don't see any risks of contract violation so far. Okay, let's go further. Our next speaker is from the Skye School of Economics, Ilya Dalmatov. Ilya, please tell us what is the social and economic efficiency of projects like this, and can you improve it using other models of interactions between investors, energy companies, and the government?
Можно вывести презентацию? Я ее специально тоже подготовил. Собственно, коллеги, хотел поделиться своими соображениями, связанными... Да, отлично, спасибо. Связанные с тем, как, по сути, реализовать вот планы по модернизации инфраструктуры, вот обсуждения, которые были, длятся вот эти вот 2 дня, в общем говорят о том, что много
we do understand from them that there are many
Поэтому,
challenges.
конечно, вопрос того, что потребность в инвестициях есть,
The issue of
точно да.
demand
Второй вопрос,
for
как повысить
investment
эффективность
is
принимаемых
absolutely
регуляторных решений,
positive.
потому что мы
How to
понимаем,
make
что
the
деятельность
regulatory
регулируемая,
solutions more efficient?
Регулятор часто консервативен в своих как-то
And
подходах, да,
the
довольно
regulator is
сильно
quite
оказывает давление
conservative.
на там, цены, тарифы, и это, возникает определенный дисбаланс,
And
определенные, в
there
общем, проблемы
is a
явно
certain
возникают. Хотя
disbalance,
стратегически
imbalance. Although strategically we understand that the development of energy supply has to be in 3 ways. Number one is sustainable, reliable and high quality power supply. 2 is the reduction of total costs, including tariffs and budgets, because this is the load for consumers. And 3 is the low carbon agenda, which has to be taken into account as well. And the state has done quite a lot, not only in terms of tariff regulation measures, but also with state support to boost the modernization, like bilateral agreements, energy service contracts. So all these tools, it somehow contradicts with legal regulation. So the question is whether these arrangements are sufficient or not sufficient, whether they are effective or not effective. And I have to highlight that all these measures of state support, they, in one way or another, they are intervening with the regulatory activities. And in terms of the Far East, all activities are regulated. So it would be quite interesting for me to understand from the participants how these regulated activities impact the modernization and implementation of investment projects through the measures of state support. Are there any problems with that? Because in my opinion, there are such problems, and I think that investment projects can be divided into the projects for maintaining the infrastructure. Then the second type is for broadening the existing infrastructure, and then the construction of the new infrastructure. So the major problem here could be that today regulator, when they launch a new construction, they cannot guarantee any tariff because they cannot predict for 5 or 10 or 15 years when these projects can be paid back. And the regulator cannot tell you what the tariff would be, and you cannot enter the projects, or you will enter the projects with sufficient risks, because you understand that your payback period can change. So the risks that I have defined, they can be defined as mmacroeconomic ones. We couldn't expect many of the changes that are happening now a year ago. We couldn't predict that the inflation would be like 12.4%. Nobody could guarantee this inflation factor, which is a risk for investors. And there are quite a lot of such factors for investors, like depreciation or subsidizing. And as long as this activity is regulated, it is impossible for the investor to guarantee the predictability of the project without taking all these risks. So in my opinion, understanding the peculiarities of regulation in the Far East due to the uniqueness of the projects and many other factors, in my opinion, our regulatory policies should aim at giving more flexibility to the regions that see and understand their strategic goals and objectives, and that could be more flexible in using the legal framework that we have as compared to the federal one, which is more conservative. And of course, a great idea that can be voiced together within the legal framework. It can take some 3 or 5 years to implement it, if at all. So I think one of the good tools is a regulatory contract, which are being promoted by the Federal Anti-Monopoly Service. But today they only have a segment only for electrical grids. They don't have any for like generation of the energy. Although it could be very topical for Yakutia. So if they had more freedom in decision making, for example, guaranteeing the price at entering the new generation construction, it would be excellent for the region and for an investor. I think that we could give such freedom. We could give more freedom and responsibility to the regions for them to promote their legal framework policies. Or we could wait for our federal legal frameworks to change. I think that we should give more opportunities for the regions because they are all unique and they have their own challenges and peculiarities, and they could be solved through such individual contracts that could take into account the specificity. Bilateral agreements is tool number 2. They cannot be used in Yakutia because Yakutia has already connected to the centralized energy system. And anyway, they couldn't be used in the areas that are not connected to either centralized or technically isolated energy systems, which is also a gap because they could be used quite efficiently. And area number 3 is to improve various stimulating arrangements. For example, now there is an opportunity of economizing when you change the source of energy, but if there are other peculiarities of modernization, this economizing is not preserved. So if we go deeper in the tariff policies, there are a lot of different nuances. There are numerous gaps that have to be changed and adjusted. And I'm always sure that we cannot do anything impeccably and regulate because we always face new challenges and tasks. But with a more flexible approach to the interests of investors to the regulated activity, I think that this is a solution that could be discussed within our strategic session, aiming for the federal authorities to hear. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Dalmatov. Yes, this is quite an interesting proposal. And we also have some proposals. And the question, I think, would be, you are right when you are saying that regulatory agreements, they are mostly applied in gas industry. So it's like the return of investment into the gas distribution facilities, and the investor is quite clear. But if we talk about the attraction of new investments, could it be applicable at all? And if we talk about the distributed generation, how the issues of energy efficiency and heat and energy supply? I believe that this is an absolutely applicable mechanism because it can be signed for a very long-term period, for some 10 to 15 years, and guarantee a certain formula of changing the price, which could be discussed and stipulated. And in my opinion, this is a concrete mechanism for guarantees, and it is meant to regulate the responsibility from the executive authorities and the companies for the project to mitigate the risks of its stakeholders. As for electrical energy and heat energy, understanding that these industries are intervened, I believe that this is also a good idea for the regulatory agreements to pack two sorts of activity: electrical supply and heat supply. Although we have a separate legal framework for heat and energy, but the regulator is one for them. And that is why I think that this issue could be investigated as well, because for an integrated modernization, when companies do both activities, they could sign agreements where they could stipulate both types of activity together. Thank you, Mr. Dalmatov. That's quite an interesting idea, but we should highlight that these things, such as regulatory agreements, they are regulated by industry-related framework, legal framework, elaborated by the Ministry of Construction or Ministry of Energy. And we, as a development institute, we provide some regional measures of support, like preferential regimes or partial subsidizing of loan rates, and it could be positive in some way for such projects. And now, giving the floor to the next speaker, I would like to introduce Vladimir Toshenko, Director General of Arctic Power Capital Company, and they have implemented such project. So tell us, please, how these measures have allowed you to implement your project. Yes, thank you. First of all, I would like to say that this project, without they cannot be implemented without some measures of support. And I would like to thank our federal executive authorities, the Ministry for the Development of the Far East and the Arctic, because they have developed this theory of Arctic residents, and the Arctic is now a special economic zone, and that's why the taxation load is now not that hard. Also, we have some preferential taxations and land plot assignment. So these projects are quite challenging in terms of technology. So without support from, for example, Rusgidro or Sakhaenergo, they could not be implemented, because we received a lot of practical consultation and advice in terms of technologies that have been tested in the north for the decades. So these projects could be implemented only in a big team. I cannot imagine the economy for the small or medium businesses to implement such projects. Yes, we have launched 5 power plants, 4 in Moma region and 1 in Verkhoyansk regions. The one from 2021 has been in operation for 1 year already, and we have saved 36% of fuel. Previously, to produce the electricity, they spent 482 tons, and we spent 310 tons. So I think that this is quite a good saving. We do have some technological challenges related with accumulators. Some technologies have failed, but now everything has been repaired and now everything is more reliable and stable. We plan to develop in terms of energy service to take part in the competition of Sakha-Energo, using the renewable energy sources and the traditional generation. What are our challenges in terms of the new projects? Well, first of all, this is a higher price of equipment because of these difficulties with deliveries of equipment. We now have higher prices. Some suppliers of diesel generators from abroad that are most energy efficient. It is not always possible to bring them directly to Russia. We have to look for some partner countries like Kazakhstan and other countries, and it entails a higher price. Russian suppliers that we are cooperating with, our priority, of course, is to work with Russian suppliers, but unfortunately, from our experience, diesel generators can be cheaper in Germany than in Yaroslavl Oblast. I mean, foreign engines and generators to pay back the investments. The greatest risk for this project's implementation is this state expertise. On the one hand, the residents of this Arctic Economic Zone have had great measures of support, but at the same time, there is a requirement for the capital construction facilities. They have to go through a state environmental expertise. Of course, our facilities cannot be compared with traditional large-scale power plants, but this requirement for state expertise makes our time frame much longer, because Arctic requires special equipment. It is never in storage, so it takes some 8 months to produce the equipment that we need for the Arctic. So I haven't seen any projects implemented with this state environmental expertise for 2 years, because this is a really long process. We would, this state expertise would take us about 6 months. Also, I wanted to note that another challenge that we can see is that all banks have become even more conservative this year, and we are not always able to attract funds and to have more projects in the Arctic, modern and reliable projects and energy efficient ones, then we have to make this state expertise simpler. Then another important issue is to work with this, to restart the program of loan compensation to the banks, banks and also for the banks to be ready to some low-income projects, because everything that is associated with energy service, it is not high income. As for the consumers, quite often I wanted to attract your attention to small settlements. In Moma district, there were 3 small settlements with some 500 residents. They cannot pay back. It's impossible to pay back your investments in them. MPV would be negative, and TORR the same. 1 or 2%, which is not enough, and no bank would provide funds. So if we talk about such settlements which have a total capacity of 1 megawatt, then probably the Rusgidro and the Ministry for the Development of the Arctic and the Far East could allocate or provide for some expenses at the expense of the ordering party. For example, reservoirs and oil storages. So this so-called fuel infrastructure and also the machinery workshops could also be provided for by the federal authorities. For Rusgidro or Sakhaenergo, they can decide it themselves. Then it would be possible to implement more of such projects. So if we think that there is a good settlement with a good income, there is a smaller one with a bad income nearby, then if we look at them together, then they would become like an average income, and banks don't want to deal with such projects as well as the investors. Yes, I think that your proposal is indeed quite timely, because the theme that we have been discussing in terms of this state support program, yes, it implies for the integrated organization and some state approach. And another issue is how it would be organized. Now I would like to give the floor to Anton Usachov, representing Hevel Energy Service. So, Anton, please tell us, we plan to localize the technologies that could be transferred to some isolated and remote areas. So tell us whether you are able to use your technologies in such projects, and how do you compete with foreign equipment and a lot of other companies involved in energy service contracts.
Давно в теме, поэтому у вас весьма такой прицельный, правильный вопрос. Вот, я действительно хотел его прокомментировать, если бы вы его и не задали, потому что то, о чем вы говорите,
so what you are talking about, so I would like the audience to understand, you are talking about a large segment of renewable generation. So these DPM RES-1 and RES-2 programs. And indeed, 1.7 gigawatts of solar generation, I'm going to talk about this. This is a huge industrial base. So we have 2 factories manufacturing solar panels already. And also we have a number of suppliers of pylons. And so the prices for steel is quite high now. So that's why pylons for a number of projects account for 12-15% of costs. And this is very expensive.
Что не дала программа ДПМВ, вот единственное,
What DPMRS program
необходимо для
didn't give and what is necessary for the hybrid generation. This is the energy storage and accumulation systems. So we don't have suppliers now. And I agree with Vladimir that there are problems with localization of additional equipment for the autonomous generation projects. For example, now have localized the manufacturing of inverters, and I think we, as being a daughter company, we will be able to use inverters because they account for a quite amount in our projects. And later I am going to tell, and also automation systems. So those who know service contracts, they know that both customers and investors want any project to become autonomous. So we have completed some 20 sites in several regions, and I hope that we will succeed in Yakutia as well. So there are challenges with autonomous modes. We have 14 modes, and the final mode is the autonomous mode, which we usually adjust for several months. Problem one is that staff wants to operate everything manually, and the second challenge is that many Russian companies manufacture equipment not according to the technical requirements.
Второго вопроса нет про вызовы. Я тогда присоединюсь к коллегам, тоже прокомментирую вызовы.
So I would like to comment on challenges as well. So this is the challenge which hasn't been mentioned here yet, but I heard it on the East Economic Forum. So when we discussed the third price zone, so I see risks definitely in our projects. So the second price zone appears in the isolated areas. For example, power transmission is sometimes 110 volts, and some of the lines, transmission lines, go via settlements. And we understand that energy service will end here. So what Ilya was talking about,
важный момент, вот как будут застрахованы риски наших инвесторов.
Our risks as investors will be covered when an isolated area stops to be such, when it is connected to the grid.
Вот. У меня был еще один момент, значит, рост стоимости оборудования, не буду на этом долго останавливаться.
Well, I'm not going to talk about the increased price of equipment. Probably the only solution is that
мне кажется, что единственный путь, вот с чего мы начали, да, отвечая на ваш вопрос, Максим, это локализация,
maximum localization of equipment, so that our power generation industry is supplied by our own parts. As for diesel generation, I agree with the previous speaker that our diesel equipment is more expensive and
Я всегда был за конструктив. Я считаю, что
I'm not just criticizing. I want to be constructive. Our DG equipment has a huge potential for improvement. So like preliminary heating and multi-factor injection, and this reduces the benefits of DG. And we had very good researchers in the beginning, so hopefully now we can break through again. And also many isolated areas have very difficult accessibility. In Chukotka, for example, one of our contractors, it took him 20 hours instead of 4 because there wasn't rain. And so he had to drag his boat. There wasn't connection, so we were worried about him. And another two important points. Today we see at many sites, and we support Rushhydro and Sakhaenergo in this respect, that we need to increase the bulk of solar power generation. Because we don't know what is going to happen with oil processing, with the availability of diesel fuels. So what is going to happen in 10 years' time? Because these projects are very sensitive to the cost of fuel, and whether it's going to be more expensive or cheaper, whether it's going to be available at all. So
сложно ведется она, потому что, в общем, сложная организация газовая, но мы пытаемся сейчас наладить диалог по осмечиванию, подсчету вопроса вариантов с переходом на СПГ.
Making calculations on switching to LNG. So how to store liquefied carbohydrates, and so the cost of gas is lower and the heat production ability is the same. So I think the state can enter here, and the gas and the state must convince the gas community that with many markets closing, China is not the solution, because China is developing their renewable energy sources, so probably very soon they won't need all those gas. Thank you. Thank you, that was very interesting, and I'm especially interested in this third price zone. I think that this is not going to implement our project. I would like to ask Sergei Dudkin from the Federal Anti-Monopoly Agency. How do you see the interaction between big power generation and small power generation? Good afternoon. Thank you for the question. There is no direct interaction between them, because large-scale generation is in the wholesale market and small-scale generation in the retail market areas. But the positive experience which can be transferred further. For example, best practices from the wholesale market, you can use them on the retail market as well. As for regulatory mechanisms,
уже внесено в законодательство за последние годы.
Many things which have been introduced into the legislation recently, they work. So, for example, the order on the economy in case of changing the source of the source, and also about to be
величины экономии относительно расчетной и
approved the norms
под проект, который Росатом реализовывает в Усть-Куйге.
Some other norms, for example, applicable to the Roshydra.
Затраты на сети, которых
What happens when the cost of construction increased?
Пунктов и фактически вот этой
For example, Roshydra complex in Усть-Куйга.
Потому что фактически на эту величину появятся расходы на сетевой комплекс. Вот такое мы в проекте постановления по регуляторным соглашениям тоже предусматриваем. Ну, если говорить еще о дополнительных мерах, которые
if we talk about some additional measures which are being developed, and probably there will be some amendments to the legislation even this year.
Федерального закона, и этот законопроект разрабатывается в рамках
And this draft law is developed within the frame of Special Commission on Improving Economics. It is related to two-party agreements,
двусторонних договоров по цене, определяемой
two-party contracts on pricing.
Он реализован в технологически изолированных территориальных электроэнергетических системах, то есть в крупных технологически изолированных системах, действующих всего 5.
Isolated energy grids.
И локальной малой изолированной труднодоступной энергетики это не касается.
But it's not related to isolated areas. So this mechanism will extrapolate to all areas not connected to unified electrical grid, and the price will be set without maximum set.
Только энергопринимающих устройств, которые введены в эксплуатацию после 1 июля 2017 года, то есть
But it is for the units, facilities launched after 1st July 2017.
Спасибо. Спасибо, Сергей Анатольевич, за комментарий.
Thank you for your comments.
Раз уж тема зашла такая вот
So since we have started about the synchronization of market mechanisms and isolated areas mechanisms, so I would like to give the floor from the NP Market Council Association, Andrei Staver.
Да. Тогда, если позволите, ответить и на этот вопрос взаимодействия, и насколько рыночные механизмы, как вы видите, применимы в изолированных
how market mechanisms can be applied in isolated areas. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. I was born in the Kuril Islands, so I'm absolutely for the modernization of this area. And I remember the 1990s when you had electricity given for 2 hours and then 2 hours break. And in my hometown, the situation has improved significantly after the modernization of the Japanese hydropower station built in the 1930s. So now the outages are rare, but I would like to talk about some other aspects of modernization. In particular, the example I brought, it was implemented because all the stakeholders were interested in the project. So it was initiated by people and got any support. So without the local support, the implementation of any federal programs is at risk. So they can remain unimplemented. The good example is once there was a federal program on modernizing electrical grids in the Kuril Islands. So lots of funds were allotted from the budget, but over several years there wasn't initiatives on sites. And these external attempts to modernize the system failed, and after 1998, this program was closed, so money were not used and the modernization didn't take place. So for modernization, you need to work a lot to increase all the stakeholders' interest. And the second thing I would like to emphasize is the economy of those settlements. Of course, the Russian forest is rich in various resources, and the extraction and processing is a huge driver of the forest and development. But launching of new mining facilities is impeded without power supply, and the availability of power supply in isolated areas is done by cross-subsidy mostly. So the budgets from the funds from budgets of various levels maybe funds are taken from the wholesale market and they go into these isolated areas. So we need to understand that the situation is quite difficult now, and we live in the time of deficit. And so you cannot rely on and expect increased funding from these sources. And if 1 kilowatt costs more, we cannot expect any development in mining industry. So summing up, regarding the modernization program, I would like to point out two moments. First, modernization is to take place not for its own sake. So along with the increased reliability, we should think about better economics of the project. So if a modernized facility increases the costs of electricity, then the demand will fall, and if the population and businesses are not able to afford the electricity because it is high, the costs are high already. And the second aspect is Mr. Usachov mentioned that is attracting investments. So we should combine three following aspects. To start modernization, we need to ensure easier entry of new players, because the easier it is for them to enter the process, the easier it will be to reach the desirable price. Second thing is the guarantees to investors, because if we fail to provide guarantees, then they won't come, or they would include higher costs of risks. And the third thing is responsibility, and this responsibility is not only of investors to the region, but also the region's obligations to the investor. Of course, we need to combine all the three aspects. So we need to develop a system of tenders which has proved to be effective on the wholesale market. And on the one hand, tenders should be technically neutral, because some investors use certain technical solutions, but then the practice shows at the procurement period, the project parameters can change a lot. So it can turn out that the project is not profitable. So the second thing is that we need to create the system of regulatory agreements. Like first you have tender, you select projects, minimizing the cost, and then you stipulate that in the regulatory contracts. And you need to stipulate the investors' obligations, the guaranteed price, and the formula for hedging risks, and the region's obligations to the investor in cases when the modernization project turns out to be not in demand, or when regulations change a lot, or when the calculations didn't take into account all the factors affecting the profit. So on the level of regulatory agreements, we could cover those risks connected with the outflow of population or closure of businesses, or maybe when an area stops to be isolated with the introduction of power transmission line. So the region is to reimburse the investor for such risks. So this is my answer. Thank you, Andrei. Well, you have mentioned several effects of the projects, and here I would like to give the floor to Oleg Popov, Deputy Director of Sakha-Energo company. So please tell us.
Модернизация объектов должна, во-первых, приносить
Of course, the
положительный эффект для
modernization of
социально-экономического развития,
facilities should be
приводить к снижению
economically
затрат.
effective,
Вот те проекты,
lead to
которые
reduced
уже
costs,
реализованы,
and
реализуются
the
за счет
projects,
энергосервисного контракта. Какие эффекты вы от них видите?
what effects do you see?
Спасибо, Максим. Добрый день,
Thank you. Good afternoon, dear colleagues.
вывести слайды.
So can I have my presentation on, please?
Мне говорят, что не было презентации от вас.
Не может быть, оно там есть.
Точно не было?
Ну, если есть такая возможность, у меня есть флешка с собой, если коллеги могут включить.
Ну, сейчас они пока поищут. Да, если можно, помогите. Чтобы не задерживать время, будьте добры, потому что, Сахаэнерго привлекательный объект.
Sakhaэнерго is an attractive region, attractive company for energy service contracts. So, what do you think on the effects of projects like this?
Прироста потребления, уменьшения потребления.
So do you see increased consumption or decreased consumption? What are the economics? Because Sakhaэнерgo implemented some of the projects themselves, and now you have service contracts.
Да, действительно, эффект есть, но
There is effect.
потребление, наверное, эти энергосервисные контракты не влияют, потому что то же самое население, то же самое потребление.
You have the same population, so we cannot say whether the consumption decreases or increases.
Безусловно, есть.
And the economics are definitely better.
Я покажу наглядно.
So I will show what are our effects we reached with the use of service contracts. So we have implemented 6 projects. One of the projects we implemented with complex energy solutions has been working for 1 year, and with our investments we have contracts, and so we make calculations every 3 months. And as of July 1st, we reached the savings on fuels at 31-32%, which amounts to 120 tons. Today is the end of the third quarter, so we are also making calculations. So we tested our system in the summertime, and we adjusted its automatic operation. So my presentation is on, and I will continue.
Начну, наверное, с того, что хотелось бы познакомить с нашей компанией.
Немножко ограниченного ресурса, поэтому...
У меня буквально 2-3 минуты.
So now we are pressed for time, just for a couple of minutes. So Sakhaэнерго company, you see it in blue, you see the area of our presence. So this is off-grid zone, which makes 2/3 of the territories republic. So we supply electricity to 160 settlements, and we operate 146 diesel stations, but we also some gas generation. And fuel consumption is over 7,000 tons. 72,000 tons. So you understand this scale.
Вот наши реализованные проекты.
So these are our projects, pilot projects implemented along with Roshydro.
Возобновляемой энергетики мы этим занимаемся очень давно, с 2010 года, и можно сказать, что мы
We have
пионерами в
been
этой области
working with RES
Мы уже
since
эксплуатируем
2010.
солнечные электростанции,
We operate 23 solar farms. We have autonomous and connected to grid stations, and we have various accumulation systems.
дизельная электростанция, которая работает
For example, in Tabalach, we have diesel station connected with solar panels and accumulators.
6 объектов реализованных, то есть мы
So we have 6 facilities working, and we have
в мае мы запустили Верхоянск.
first one, Badagay was the biggest one, and then had in Verkhoyansk, and now the biggest one is in Khanu,
За полярным кругом.
the largest above the Arctic Circle.
Оборудование у нас дизельное оборудование, да, но импортного производства, но
So our diesel equipment is mostly of foreign make,
поставлять его через китайские заводы.
and so, it can be supplied via Chinese plants.
ГЭК Табалах, который у нас работает,
So our Tabalach facility saved us 130 tons. Maybe now it's reached 175. The solar farm in Verkhoyansk is working in this starting period, so we don't have any calculations on fuel savings.
105 тысяч киловатт-часов. Ну и вот те объекты, которые мы запустили,
has already generated 105 tons kilowatts of power. So we have savings in all our settlements.
все эти энергосервисная тематика.
So these are our plans, and
не везде она работает, да, то есть мы
so
с инвесторами, с Росгидро,
and service contracts don't work everywhere.
есть очень хорошая экономика,
So
очень плохая, то есть если смиксовать это все, то есть можно получить.
we use this comprehensive approach. So in some places, some projects are effective, some are not, but in total, you can reach profit. So along with our investors, we are planning to build another 72 facilities, and I hope that we are going to achieve our goal.
Думаю, что все будет хорошо.
Спасибо.
Thank you.
Олег Ярославович, а вот такой вопрос.
And Олег,
было сказано, что необходимо взаимодействие с людьми на местах. Вот как идет это взаимодействие с местным населением?
how
Например,
is your interaction with the local population going?
активно помогают реализации этих
So how
проектов,
supportive are they?
при решении там, вопросов земельного характера.
For example, when you settle some land issues.
Ну, в основе своей, то есть мы как головная компания здесь в городе Якутске, то есть все эти проблемы мы решаем там.
So we actually solve these problems here with the governmental bodies in Yakutsk, and on sites people help in terms of technical challenges.
Основной проблемой, как мы уже с этим столкнулись, то есть является земля.
Yes, allotment of land is one of the major issues, because these solar farms, they require large territories, and quite often municipalities cannot allot big plots of land. So because there are like green areas around settlements or agricultural lands, pastures and so on.
Максимально достигает до 1,5 лет можно с этим заниматься.
So it can take up to 18 months to have a plot allotted.
Мы сейчас активно работаем с правительством.
So we are working with the government to reduce those
Хотелось бы сказать, что
terms.
наша корпорация,
Our corporation
антарктическая зона, то мы, в принципе, нашим компаниям-резидентам оказываем поддержку по земле.
support our resident companies in terms of land issues.
Спасибо, Олег Ярославович.
Thank you, Oleg. I would like to go to our next speaker. Is Enelt company Alexander Goryansky, Director on Innovative Development.
Представитель Совета рынка говорил то, что вот нужна конкуренция.
So people said here that we need competition, and I have 3 companies competing between each other. So that's good. So how do you manage to compete? Because I understood that the technology is quite the same.
Как удается правильно
And also, how is to choose a correct technical solution? So how is it profitable to build a diesel solar station, or maybe it's better to build a microgrids with solar panels on roofs?
Спасибо за вопрос.
Thank you for your question.
Вопрос выбора оптимального технического решения.
As for choosing the technical solution, it's the key issue in such contracts because the idea of the contract is based on the return on investment due to savings. And since this is a regulated activity and tariffs are regulated, there is no another source of savings. So we need to find an optimum technical solution, both efficiency and cost-wise. So talking about technique, so it is calculated. Microgrid in diesel solar pair depends on the load graph. So we are present in 35 sites, and we never considered installment of solar panels on routes. So we don't involve local population. So everywhere we think about land plots, because Sakhaenergo operates all these panels, so there must be access to the equipment, and if you install them on roofs, that won't work.
Тогда вот, за счет чего удается конкурировать? То есть вот,
so where is the room for competition? So you have, for example, diesel units, and you have solar farm. So how do you compete with other companies?
Как конкурировать? В общем-то, не то чтобы мы конкурируем, мы, в принципе, двигаемся параллельно.
Well, we actually move in parallel.
Похожи.
Because we have similar approaches, similar solutions.
Просто выбор оборудования, грамотное выстраивание логистики.
Well, the advantages could come from the choice of equipment and better logistics, or maybe a localization of equipment.
То есть как раз на мой взгляд, главный эффект заключается
I think the main effect is the localization of manufacturing for such projects. So we, for example, went for our own manufacturing of steel pylons. So we have direct contracts with Chinese manufacturers of solar panels and inverters, and we have developed our own control system, and so these factors can lead to the cost and technical efficiency. So you see, you can say that good technical solution and own manufacturing brings you benefits in this competition. Yes, energy service contract is not is a very complex thing, and the competencies here are engineering. So engineering companies should participate most effectively.
А такой вопрос, Александр. Вот мы с вами долго обсуждали про экономическую эффективность.
We discussed the economic efficiency of projects, and you have a large industrial facility which produces equipment. How do you see the further development of your manufacturing facility? So these service contracts, they give impetus to your manufacturing. So what is more attractive to you and more profitable, manufacturing or service contracts? Well, energy service actually, yes, gave impetus to our company. So we started a new direction in our company. We expanded our competences. So we started working with accumulators, inverters, and automated control, also metal processing facility. So this is the synergetic effect. So it's difficult to say which direction is more important. So, but eventually it gave us development. And I would like to draw your attention to offset contracts. When an agreement between a client and contractor stipulates the construction of a plant, and then the contractor serves as a contractor as well.
В 44-м ФЗ называются контрактами со встречными инвестиционными обязательствами.
So these are so-called contracts with some obligations. So these are long-term contracts for 10-15 years. And this summer, the government introduced amendments into the rules of signing such contracts, facilitating them. Now they have decreased the investment threshold. So it used to be 1 billion rubles, and now it is reduced to 100,000 rubles, 100 million rubles. And
под эту большую программу модернизации, задумываться о дальнейшей перспективе, то такие контракты, такая форма договоров с формированием предприятия, может быть, полного цикла,
stipulating the construction of manufacturing facilities will help us to decrease capex and to increase the attractiveness of such contracts. The localization of manufacturing for distributed generation is also very attractive for us.
Это позволяет компаниям развивать производство на территории России, или они начинают активно закупать это за границей? То есть надо ли ограничительные барьеры вводить или поддерживать?
So should we limit or support these activities?
Пример развития рынка возобновляемой энергетики, мы уже о нем говорили.
For example, the RES market development. And moving to our next speaker.
Евгения Франки, Head of the Analytical Board. Здесь уже была затронута тема когда условно заказчик
Russia
заключает
Renewable
такой контракт,
Energy
ну, наверное, это какая-то
Development
схожая аналогия
Association.
с программой ДПМ, да, когда государство заключило с инвесторами контракт, что они локализуют производство, будут и инвестировать и в производство, и потом в объекты. Вот насколько, по вашему мнению, применимо, возможно применение этой схемы вот,
So
для
how
таких проектов
this
в удаленных
mechanism
территориях?
could be
И
used
второй
for
вопрос по
isolated
поводу
areas,
эффектов. Вот
and
мне кажется,
also what
что
are the
действительно Ассоциация
effects?
развития возобновляемой энергетики вот огромную работу ведет
I'm
по
sure that
экономическим,
the
социально-экономическим
Renewable Energy
эффектам
Development
от программы
Association
модернизации ДПМ-ВИЭ, точнее, от программы ДПМ-ВИЭ, да, от первой, второй программы.
works a
Вот
lot
много
on the
презентаций, обсуждений. И мне кажется, вот
modernization
не
under
совсем достаточно ведет
DPRS,
работы по
and probably
анализу
doesn't work
эффектов
enough
от
on
модернизации
analyzing
локальной
the
энергетики
effects of the
применения
local
возобновляемых
energy
источников. Хотелось бы ваше
modernization
мнение на этот
using
счет услышать.
RES.
Да, но для нас, как для Ассоциации развития возобновляемой энергетики в России, тема развития ВИЭ в удаленных регионах, технологически удаленных и изолированных, крайне важна.
The development of RES in isolated areas is very important.
Ведем работу над этой темой.
And we have been working closely with that, and
в разработке НПА и в оценке.
And we assess
есть взаимодействие с Минэнерго.
The effects as well, and we cooperate with the Ministry of Energy, Power Industry. So I would like to ask to put my presentation on, and I would be more specific then.
У нас есть презентация?
Да, у меня есть. Только что списывалась, поддержку мне сказали, что...
Вот.
Должна быть.
Продолжайте, пожалуйста.
Go on, please.
Можно сразу следующий слайд?
Next slide, please.
Можно следующий, пожалуйста?
Next slide.
Да, смотрите, я хотела бы, во-первых, предоставить общую картину.
I would like to give the overview. What is the distribution of generation in Russia? In light pink, you see isolated areas, great non-priced areas, and in green, first and second price zones. So at the moment, we have 5.5 gigawatts of RES in Russia. And this generation is predominantly in the first and also in the second price zones. And the effect of this was possible due to the state support programs, RES 1 and RES 2. And forecast is quite favorable. At the same time, in isolated and non-price zones, we have only 160 megawatts. And on the next slide, you see that broke down these megawatts by facilities. So the capacity is quite low, but you see the leading regions. So first of all, Kamchatka and Sakhalin, due to geothermal power generation, which accounts for 81 megawatts. But we see that Yakutia also among leaders due to solar generation. And we expect 20 megawatts added before 2024. So we see that by regions the development is different and technologies are different, and to reach our target set in the government order
социально-экономического развития, стратегии социально-экономического развития с низким уровнем выбросов парниковых газов.
And also given the goal of reduced greenhouse gas emissions, it's not enough. The installed capacity is not enough, and we need to work on improving the support mechanisms and the informing of potential investors.
Несомненно, уже есть ряд нормативных актов, которые
legislative acts
определенные механизмы поддержки в таких регионах.
Support, regulate mechanisms in these territories, and one of the mechanisms of that is the support of retail market, and there are certain regulations for isolated areas. As of 2022, we see that the program launched in 2015 hasn't led to very extensive development of the industry. For example, in Amur Oblast, they had tender for retail on the retail market, but this is the only achievement probably.
Также механизм привлечения инвестиций для проекта модернизации устарелой дизельной генерации за счет установки ВИ-мощностей тоже, несмотря на
and also despite some plans and changes in legislation,
конкурсных отборов конкретно, есть проекты, сегодня они представляются.
There are RES projects, but this mechanism still needs some specification.
Пожалуйста, следующий слайд.
Next slide.
Что делает РВ для
What our association does to attract attention to this topic? Since last year, we have been making regional ratings. We compare regions in terms of their attractiveness to investments in RES. So, and we decided to divide the regions. So, we consider price zones and remote areas separately, so different ratings for these two zones. And we presented our results at East Economic Forum. So these ratings help to draw attention to to investors, and also it helps the regions themselves to understand that probably they need to pay more attention on this. So the rating covers 6 criteria, and each group will have more like sub-criteria. So, of course, we evaluate natural potential, natural resources potential. We consider logistics, existing logistics, access to port facilities, what is the structure of motorways, railways, land plots. So we consider investment potential, so whether there exist mechanisms attracting investors, and how many energy service contracts are signed. So we made analysis ourselves, and also we sent questionnaires to regions. So that's why I encourage the regions to fill in these questionnaires. So we consider the implementation of current projects and also future projects, and also we evaluate the involvement of local administrations, how often this topic is mentioned in regional media. We also assess training of personnel. In 2022, 15 regions participated in this rating, and we had many nominations, so regions leading in total, and also the greenest region, that was Kamchatka, the investor's choice, that was Sakhalin, planned projects, leader of the industrial development is Kaliningrad Oblast, and so on. And the Sakha Republic ranked third as the leader of the total parameters.
Сахалин и Камчатка тоже сильные кандидаты.
Sakhalin and Kamchatka are also strong candidates. Yakutia has about 5 megawatts of solar power generation and 0.94 wind generation.
Был проведен конкурсный отбор с Русгидро, тоже сегодня все это было представлено. Это действительно достаточно.
So compared to other regions, these are good results. And also, if we
Саха выиграла бы, у нее был бы самый высокий инвестиционный потенциал, что касается.
If we made this investment now, Yakutia would also rank first in terms of attractiveness to investors.
В области разработки НПА по развитию ВИА. И было отмечено, что очень хорошие показатели в открытости региона и публичной вовлеченности.
And also the region demonstrates high public involvement.
Теперь я хочу представить наше предложение, которое,
I would like to present our proposals. Of course, we understand that there are some barriers for REST development, and we discuss it with our partners. And one of the major barriers is the lack of information for potential investors. It is quite difficult to receive the information on potential modernization sites, and also it's almost impossible to do your engineering reconnaissance of the sites and to obtain information on the structure of consumption, on prices and tariffs. So that's why one of our proposals is to create a federal internet portal where this information is available, so investors could make their decisions easier. So to create such a portal, probably there is a special financing fund is necessary, and if the investors use this information, they could compensate for the expenditures of the fund. Also, the existing mechanisms of selections, they are used, but not to their full. So that's why our association proposes
со стороны энергобезопасности целесообразно, но своего рода обязательность для проведения отборов как на рознице
that tenders become mandatory, including modernization projects, especially if you
потенциально конкурсные отборы должны быть рассмотрены.
have a proposal from an investor. Also, we propose to set target indicators on gradual reduction of budget subsidies for energy supply, energy saving. So these are the proposals from our association, and again, I would like to confirm that we welcome the participation of the regions into projects like this.
Очень интересный материал, аналитический, и, безусловно, разработка подобного рода материалов.
That's an interesting analytical information, and of course, it will definitely benefit our project. As your idea for the portal, with the Russia Energy Agency, we are developing an investment map of investment of projects in Russia. So I invite you to the more active participation in terms of analyzing not only existing projects, but in general on evaluating the effect of such projects on the economy of the Russian Far East and Russia as a whole. So this would be very useful. In conclusion, I would like to say that our today's session, it's important that we have heard all the presentations and all stakeholders, and starting from government to analytical organizations. We are talking about the same. We need some target program covering all the challenges which will ensure regular modernization of local power generation with the use of RES. And we need the mechanisms of state support for the benefit of the regions and investors. So today's session is just a first step in discussing these issues, and next week we are going to start our discussions on the federal level, and so hopefully this will be enter the decree of the Russian president, and next year we are going to see more projects like this. Thank you.